In this video, I will introduce to you about the skill compare and contrast, which is very important in history examinations. We need to find similarities and differences when tackling questions about compare and contrast in different places, events, or time periods. There are several levels for comparison. The first is horizontal, while the second level is vertical. What are the differences? For horizontal, we compare the same time period but across different places. As for vertical, we compare the same place in different periods of time. What do we mean by that? I'll give you some examples to make it clearer. For horizontal, we might compare between different places, for example, East and West Germany, during Cold War in the same period of time. Whereas for vertical, we might compare the same place, for example, China, in different time periods, for example, before and after 1949. So, we use this in 80% of history questions. It is a lot. If you don't believe me, I will give you some examples. For horizontal comparison, we might use it in relative importance questions. For example, if we do relative importance question about the causes of First World War, we will need to compare between causes which happened before the First World War. So it's the same period of time. Whereas for vertical, we might use it in turning point questions because we need to compare before and after a single year event in history. So it's across different time periods. There are several ways to structure your essays for compare and contrast questions. The first option you have for comparison is to first write about similarities in different aspects. For example, economic similarities and political similarities together, and then political differences and economic differences together. So in this first option, you'll first focus on writing about the similarities first. And then you focus later on differences. This option has its pros and cons. For pros, it is easier to organize because you just need to write similarities and differences separately. So it requires less language abilities and ability to organize. However, it does not look as coherent because you need to look across different paragraphs for similarities and differences of the same aspect. Whereas for the second option we have is to focus on a single aspect. For example, you focus on political similarities and differences first, and then we focus on economic similarities and differences. So this time we focus on the similarities and differences of a single aspect first before moving to the similarities and differences of the next aspect. This second option has its pros and cons as well. For pros, it looks more coherent because you focus on a single aspect first, so the readers don't need to read across several paragraphs to know your views about the political similarities and differences, and therefore it's easier to follow for the readers. However, it takes skills to remain logical and focused and organized in doing this type of structuring because You need to compare between similarities and differences at the same time. These two options are both alright in my opinion when writing about essays for compare and contrast. It really depends on your style and confidence on which type you feel more comfortable with. So remember, the main issue here is to stay focused and organized while doing your compare and contrast. Don't mix things together and make it difficult for readers to follow. And you need to include similarities and differences. You cannot only write about similarities or differences. You need to write both of them. And then the last point to take note of is to stay balanced. Try your best to show awareness that you need to compare between similarities and differences, although there might be very little similarities or differences. Just show the awareness of doing so. So I have a small task for you for this skill, which is to list one example of when you will use compare and contrast in your real life, in your daily life. It might not be your own experience, it might be some experience from people you observe, but just list one example from your daily life, which you can see evidence of using compare and contrast. As for a hint, it is actually more often than you realize. For example, if you buy things, you already use compare and contrast. So you can try to observe how this skill is used in your daily life. But this video will be uploaded to Google Drive for your further reference and revision. So this is the end of our lesson video. So see you next time.